60theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Federal judge threw out the criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York AG Letitia James, concluding that Trump's handpicked prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, was illegally appointed. Well, we're going to talk about that. I mean, this is far from over. But we're going to talk about that with Joe Moreno. But first, of course, I know you want to hear pieties from Jim Comey. Nobody is more smarmy, and no one has a bigger misplaced sense of moral rectitude than Jim Comey. So it's always enjoyable when he takes to video to offer his musings on things that have passed that don't include Taylor Swift.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking. But I was also inspired by the example of the career people who refused to be part of this travesty. It cost some of them their jobs, which is painful, but it preserved their integrity, which is beyond price. And I know they will serve again. I was very lucky that some of the best lawyers in America stepped forward to represent me. I hope they serve as an example to more and more lawyers, especially at some of the big firms, to participate in protecting our liberty, protecting the rule of law. And my family and friends were always with me, and luckily for me, include some of those great lawyers.
Okay, that's actually all I can really stomach. Some of the great lawyers that rallied to his defense. Oh, and Pat Fitzgerald also. Joseph Moreno is a former federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice and the National Security Division, former staff member with the FBI's 9/11 Review Commission, and a U.S. Army combat veteran. Joseph Moreno, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, great to be joining you from Washington, D.C.
All right. Well, number one, the dismissal of the charges can be appealed. And I'm a little unclear, so help me if you would. The a judge's decision here, Curry's decision, that this violated the appointments clause as it pertains to U.S. attorneys. How is that? I mean, you have 120-day appointments for acting U.S. attorneys, and Lindsay Halligan was well within that term.
Hey, Dan. So first off, you put your finger exactly on the description of James Comey, which is smarmy. I would use the same exact word. There's no love lost here between me and this guy. But as far as the process reason for why his case was dismissed, I think we should keep in mind this was not dismissed on the merit of his case.
Right.
So I think his victory lap is very premature, right?
Dismissed without prejudice.
Exactly. So no one said here that he didn't do what he's been charged with.
Right.
What they said was the process broke down. And so the judge in this case said, well, take a step back, right? Normally, a U.S. attorney is a Senate-confirmed position. When a president comes into office, he gets to appoint the whole slate of something like 93 different U.S. attorneys across the U.S. and territories. Now, that takes time. Sometimes it takes months. And so pending that, either a deputy or a career professional prosecutor will serve as the acting U.S. attorney while that seat is empty. Or if the Senate is really stalling or taking its time, the president, as you noted, has the ability to appoint an individual, can be anybody, for 120 days. Now, the problem in this case is, now we're into November, right? We're into 11 months into the Trump administration. There is no Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney here in the Eastern District of Virginia. So President Trump already had one interim appointment Lindsay Halligan was the second one. And so that's what the judge really hung his hat on, saying, look, sorry, you've used up your one-time 120-day interim appointment. I am disqualifying Ms. Halligan as your second one. In the interim, before a proper U.S. attorney is Senate confirmed, it's got to be somebody from within who's serving in that role. So usually it's the next in line, it's the deputy. So again, I know James Comey is high-fiving all his supporters and saying this was a travesty and this case was nonsense from the get-go, but he really shouldn't be hanging his hat too much on this because, as you pointed out, the dismissal was without prejudice, which means the Trump administration has 6 months to revisit it if they choose to.
Although, Andy McCarthy suggested this was going to happen, and for this reason, about this 120-day. But it is interesting. Stephen Calabrese has written about this, too, and he believes that interim U.S. attorneys whose 120-day appointments have expired without the Senate ever voting on their nomination can be reappointed to an indefinite number of 120-day terms until and unless the Senate votes down their nominations, so long as they've been nominated for the office in question. So if you have why wouldn't you get 2 bites at the apple if you have one interim U.S. attorney acting U.S. attorney resign prior to Senate confirmation? Well, then that role needs to be filled. So you would need you want to appoint somebody pending confirmation. So why wouldn't you get that second bite? You know what I mean?
No, you would think a law this important would be more clear, and yet you can read it a little vague. And of course, this judge took the Comey side of that reading, with the reasoning that if a president had unlimited 120-day interim appointments, he or she could just keep doing that and bypass the Senate confirmation process. So now that, of course, means that a Senate that's recalcitrant, that just refuses to appoint a president's nominees, could basically kneecap a president's Justice Department. So there's good arguments here, too, that this was a poor reasoning by Judge Nachimov of this law, and I could see other judges ruling differently. So the Trump administration could keep this fight going and bring it to the Supreme Court and to advocate their reading of this 120-day interim appointment rule. On the other hand, what I would say is, look, if you want to revisit this case, it does not have to be here in Virginia. You could have another U.S. attorney bring it, or you could have Maine justice bring it. So rather than go down this rabbit hole of fighting on the process, I would revisit the merits of the case, and if I were the Trump administration, figure out whether they want to keep continuing this case and where they should bring it next.
And then just for clarity's sake, Tish James's case is dismissed for the same reason. So basically, Lindsay Halligan's name is on both indictments, and so because of this alleged process error, or it's a process error that, at least according to the federal judge in question here, then both cases go without any sort of without the merits in either case being addressed.
Exactly correct. Right. They were both brought in the same jurisdiction. Eastern District of Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., is a very common jurisdiction to bring cases against senior elected officials, senior military officials, senior intelligence community officials. It's just a lot of cases flow through this docket, and it's a very sophisticated jurisdiction. But as we've seen, there's a lot of flexibility about where you can bring cases. Tish James lives in New York. You could have brought the case there. So you could have brought it down in the Western District of Virginia. So, there's flexibility here. I think they were going for the idea that this is a very well-known jurisdiction with very experienced judges, but they're by no means bound to bring the cases here again the next time.
Right. But, I mean, I agree with you. I would be shocked if these cases were not refiled. So, we're far from over here with Tish James and Comey.
I think that's right. I think the Trump administration is due its day in court on the merits of these cases, and that's how criminal matters should be fought out, really. I mean, process grounds are great, and on the defense side, when I'm a practicing defense counsel, of course I'm going to pick away at any process deficiencies that I can argue. But at the end of the day, it's the substance of a case that really matters. It's the merits of the case. It's the quality of your evidence and the quality of your arguments on both sides, and ultimately what a jury decides.
All right. Turning our attention to potentially another legal matter. I was a bit surprised, in a sense, to see a post on X from the Department of War, so Secretary Hegseth, suggesting that there's a possibility that U.S. Senator Mark Kelly will be recalled to active duty for the purposes of facing a court-martial for that video he participated in with 5 other Democrat congresswomen last week, calling on men and women in the armed services, reminding them, friendly reminder that they do not have to follow an illegal order given by the commander-in-chief, and they should consult their JAG officers, or if they have any question. Of course, this is something that they all already know, so this was just political theater. But what do you think about the prospect of action under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for the combat veterans? Because Jason Crow participated too. For those who participate in that video.
Well, when I saw this video, I think it's frankly disgusting. I think to have half a dozen elected officials from Congress, politicians, reminding the over 1 million service members across our branches of their duty to follow the law, I think is just really so condescending, so talking down to every military enlisted or officer who serves. And one of the first things that we teach our new soldiers is to respect the law, is to follow legal orders, is to understand the rules of engagement and the law of war. So, and as you point out, right, there's an entire JAG Corps, which is where I serve, hundreds of lawyers across our service branches, and our sole purpose is to make sure that the military functions legally. So to have Senator Kelly and a handful of other Democrats lecturing us about making sure we don't follow illegal orders is just really, really disgusting. Because I think we've seen plenty of hardcore political name-calling, right? We've seen the Democrats try to troll the district courts to find sympathetic judges to stop military action. They've all been slapped down. And so now they take this next step. And they have service members who are serving their countries in the crossfire. So I think it's really despicable. Now the question about what to do. Right?
Yeah. Because of course Trump, characterized it, and others have too, as seditious, and that the performative video draws the overheated, in my view, blowback, and so like I said, but I mean, is this actionable even under the Uniform Code of Military Justice?
Very difficult. So
yeah.
The UCMJ applies to active duty service members 24/7, right? So if I'm on active duty, anything I do, I shoplift from a 7-Eleven, right, I can get charged under the UCMJ. If you're a reservist, but you're serving on your reserve monthly weekend on active duty, or you're doing a tour of active duty, the UCMJ applies. For retirees, it's a lot more gray. So if you finish your 20 years, you tap out, you're getting your pension, in theory, you remain subject to the UCMJ till the day you die. But in practice, it really has to be tied to something that you did or you failed to do while on duty. So if I retire and then 6 months later they find out that I was pilfering from the Treasury, or I was engaged in arms deals, or I assaulted someone, they can recall me to active duty and they can court-martial me. Totally legit. Something like this, where you have Mark Kelly, now he's been out for years. He's drawing his pension. He's a retired naval captain, and he does something like this. If he was on active duty, he could absolutely be prosecuted under Article 88, which is contempt toward officials, and there's a few other things I could probably figure out to charge him with. As a retiree, pulling him back on active duty to charge him with that, I think would be extremely difficult and subject to some serious challenges. What I would say is, if you want to try to build a case against all 6 of these, don't go down the path of the UCMJ. there are federal laws like the insurrection statute, which talks about inciting insurrection against the authority of the U.S. I'd focus on that. It would still be a tall hill to climb, but that's the way I would go if you want to investigate these individuals.
But I mean, whether either way, though, again, their explicit words were, you have no responsibility to follow illegal orders. And so, like I said, presented as a friendly reminder. Now we can all read the subtext. We're not idiots. But it was just political gamesmanship, and to suggest that would rise to the level of inciting insurrection. I mean, you have to take people at what they actually said, not the sort of insinuations they're making, right? I think it would be really counterproductive to pursue these public officials either in a military court or in a civilian court, don't you?
No, you're right, Dan. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it would be very difficult. It would probably be counterproductive. And I think if you want to shine a spotlight on this sort of political gamesmanship, you do it in the political battlefield, right? You call this out. You go to their jurisdictions. You go to them in their election years, and you remind people of how little they think of our service members, that they needed this quote unquote reminder of something that every service member knows from the day he or she enlists. So I think that's the way you push back, not try to go through the courts and do something, because otherwise it's probably just going to be a fruitless effort.
Yeah. Joseph Moreno, former federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice and the National Security Division, former staff member with the FBI's 9/11 Review Commission, and a U.S. Army combat veteran. Joseph Moreno, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. And Joseph Moreno joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Don't miss In Grace with Pastor Jim Scudder Jr. Now heard on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Tune in and find hope as Jim Scudder explores